Hi, it's Helen from Witchcrafts. Welcome back to my series showing how I'm making a junk journal. So what we're going to be doing today is putting the signatures into the cover, which is now all set and ready to go. But before I show you how I do that, I thought what I'd do first of all is just give you a little look at some different methods that there are of binding signatures into journals. So as you know, the one that we're going to be using for the journal that we're currently making is what's called the hidden spine binding method, which is where you attach the signatures, the pages of your journal to a piece of something else, card or fabric, and then you glue that into the spine of the journal. Now this one I need to finish off because obviously you can just see the white paint here that I've used, which doesn't look very nice, so I need to stick some washi tape or paint this or something to make it look a bit nicer. But the benefit of doing that is that it's quite strong, it's quite stable, you don't see the stitching on the outside of the spine at all, and it allows you to pretty much lay flat your pages when you're working on them. So that's one method. Another method that you can use is pretty much the same, apart from this time you actually stitch right the way through the cover of the journal. So this is one I made quite a while ago, and you can see that there's nothing here. This is just the inside of the journal, and the pages are stitched directly into the spine. The good thing about this is that, as you can see, I've only got 2 signatures in this journal and there's quite a lot of space here. So if I wanted to, I could add a 3rd signature in here quite straightforward. So this is just done using a very simple stitching method, using some thread to stitch that through. This is probably the hardest but possibly the neatest way of binding a book. This is made using what's called perfect binding, which is where you actually attach the signatures by stitching them all together first and then applying glue to hold them in place, and then you use these end pages to actually hold the journal pages into the journal cover. So this is a very professional sort of finish. It allows you to have a very neat finish. It looks very smart and professional. It can be a bit stiff, but you can sort of bend the pages out like this to make it lie a little bit flatter. This is a form of a Japanese form of binding. I'll put the name on the screen because I can't for the life of me remember what it is. And this is a good method. It's nice and sturdy, and you basically just sew right the way through all of your pages and the 2 front covers at the same time. But the problem with this is you can't really open the book very wide. Now this is a journal which has got pockets made of tracing paper for storage of ephemera. So that's another way of doing it. Sorry if the camera angle's changed. My camera ran out of battery, so I had to wait for the battery to recharge. So we've looked at the other ones. This one here is an example of what I think is called Coptic stitch binding, and this is quite a traditional form of binding things where you stitch right through the cover. So this is hard covers, but the bonus of this is that the pages lay completely flat, and you can make it as thick or as thin as you want. You can have as many or as few pages in a Coptic stitch bound book as you want. And then finally I thought I'd just show you this one that I made, which I actually made this out of a Amazon delivery envelope, and it's just a button on the front, a bit of elastic, and this one has been also stitched right through the spine, and then has a couple of signatures in here, but I just thought it was interesting to show you that you can make a cover for a journal out of just about anything. Right, I've gathered together a whole stack of things that we're going to need for the next stage, which is binding the signatures into our journal. And if you remember, we're going to be using the hidden spine method, which is where you attach the signatures to something else and then attach that to the spine. So that way you don't have that thing of the stitching being visible through the spine. So obviously we've got our cover and our 3 signatures that we've already assembled, and we're happy that those are going to fit in the spine quite nicely. And then what I've done is I've taken a piece of fabric. Now this is actually from a sofa material samples book where you can go into a shop and choose the pattern that you want for your sofa. And I've cut this so that it's about the same dimensions as the spine area. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't matter if it's slightly too big or slightly too small, but you want to make it sort of, if you can, about the same dimensions as the width of your spine, and obviously it needs to be the full length. And then you can use fabric, paper, card. Fabric is easier because it's obviously flexible. Stiff card is quite tricky. The one I'd made previously, I'd used quite stiff card, and that I found a bit tricky to manipulate because you do need to do quite a lot of flipping and turning of the pages as you're stitching them. So, but if you are going to use fabric, you want to probably put some paper on the other side of it, just so that it's got something to bite onto the cover with. So that's those bits. So we will move the cover out of the way. We don't need that for a minute. And there's the signatures and the spine. And the next thing you need is you're going to need something to bind it with. So you're going to need, first of all, a needle. Now this is an example of a bookbinder's needle. It's got quite a large eye and it's got a sharp point at the very end so that you can make sure that you can push it through. We are going to be making holes in the signatures before we do that, but it's worth having a sharp one. So I've got 2 different lengths here, and it's just personal preference whether you prefer a longer or a shorter needle. And then to talk about what we're actually going to bind it with, there's a lot of options. You could use some string. This is just some simple household white string. So it's quite strong and it's quite thin. I've got here some cotton sewing thread. You want to be careful what colour you choose. Obviously we've got a kind of a bluey theme going on with ours, so green is perhaps not the best choice for that. This is some sort of thicker cotton twine. I'm not really sure where I got this from. It must have been in some kind of craft kit of some description, but that's that one. Then there's embroidery floss. Now obviously these come in a huge range of colours, and they're cotton, so they're going to be nice and flexible, and you can choose how many of the strands you choose to use, but it can get a bit fluffy and it's not the strongest material in the world. Now this finally is a sort of a professional bookbinder's material. This is waxed cotton thread, so it's similar to this ordinary cotton thread, but the difference with this is it's got a waxy coating on it. Now you can obviously, if you've got beeswax or paraffin wax, then you could coat your own, but it might get a little bit messy and you might end up with wax transferring onto your pages of your signatures. So you can buy this relatively inexpensively from various places, and this is what I'm going to be using today. The next thing you're going to need is a pokey tool of some description. This is an awl. I do have one with a sort of a wooden domed handle, but I can't find what I've done with it. It'll turn up eventually, I'm sure, but it needs to be something pokey. You could use your needle to poke the holes through, but you don't really want to dull the tip of this. But an awl is perfect, and you can get these pretty much anywhere really. You could use a drill bit or anything else that's got like a metal skewer, something like that, if you don't have an awl. And then a pair of scissors. And then finally we're going to be punching holes down through our fabric. So we need something underneath. Now this is a self-healing mat, but I don't want to sort of damage this when I'm poking holes in the surface. So I'm going to use something just to protect it. And I've got a pile of folded backing paper here. You could also use a tea towel. It needs to be something that's going to give you enough firmness, but a little bit of squash, so that when you push down to make your holes, it's going to have a little bit of give, and for goodness sake don't do it on your best dining room table or any table really, because you will make holes in it. So first of all, we're going to mark where we're going to be punching these holes, and we've got 3 signatures, so we need to divide this strip into 3. So quite conveniently, this piece of fabric is about 4.5 centimeters wide, not including the jagged bits on either side, so that's going to make doing the maths to sort out where we need to punch the holes relatively easy. So half of 4.5 is 2.25, so find 2.25 approximately, and then half of 2.25 is 1 and a bit, so we'll go for about there and then come across. It doesn't have to be exact. Okay, this isn't precision, this is a junk journal. We're making something beautiful, and beauty doesn't always have to be perfect. Okay, then what we're going to do is just join those lines up. Now the other way to do this, of course, would be to fold the piece in half and then see where the middle is. So it's pretty much where I've drawn the line anyway. So now what we need to do is we need to decide where we're going to punch the holes, and you can absolutely eyeball this. You don't need to use a ruler at all for any of this. You can just roughly work out where the middle is. So this is about 19.5 centimeters wide. So I'm going to do that at about 9.75 centimeters to find the very middle, about there. And then what I'm going to do is, rather than dividing this in half, which is going to give us our next hole about here, which is a bit far down, I want the hole a bit further up. So I'm actually going to mark at 7 centimeters either side of that center mark, and that will give us a wider spread for our holes and our stitching. So once we've done those measurements, all we need to do now is just make sure that we know roughly where we're going to be punching the holes, and then we can go ahead and make the holes. So I've got my piece of fabric here. Make sure that you're drawing your measurements, by the way, on the back, on the side that's going to be glued into the cover, so that you won't see them. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to write top on here, so that I know that that's going to be the top, because when we come to transfer these marks over to the signatures, we don't want to end up with it being flipped round. So then all we're going to do is just take our awl or pokey tool and just go through and make a hole. So I'll just repeat that for all of these. Be really careful of your fingers. I can't tell you the number of times I've stabbed myself with an awl while I've been punching holes in things. So just make sure that when you're pushing through from the other side with your awl, that your fingers are clear of what you're doing, because you don't want to get blood on your work. Right, so there's all our holes. A bit tricky to see on camera, but they are there, I promise you. Now what we need to do is make a start on transferring these holes across to our signatures. So to do that, I'm going to do it roughly by eye, because I've done this enough times to know roughly what I'm doing. So I'm just going to position the signatures. You can do this one at a time if you want to, or you can use this method and do them all at once. So I'm lining them up so that they are approximately top and bottom here. And then all I'm going to do, it's easier if you look from above, is to just transfer the marks that you've got here onto your signature. So you might find you want to stand up to do this. And then once you've done it for the first one, then what I like to do is just take the signatures so that the folds are facing towards me, and then just transfer that mark to the other two signatures. As I said, it doesn't have to be exact. This is a junk journal. It's not some kind of professionally presented book. Not too sure what's going on with my technology at the moment, but I've just punched all the holes in all of my signatures and the camera didn't record any of it. So I'll just show you briefly again what I did, but just bear in mind that I've already done the holes. Now, to hold them together, I'm using these giant paper clips, which I just got from Amazon. They come in a pack like this with lots of different colours, and they are huge, so they're really good for holding the pages together. The way I hold them is to put one on one side and one on the other, and then that allows you to still open and close the signature while you're punching the holes. And then what I did, if you remember, is we've got our hidden spine with the holes punched into it, and so this will be the first signature, which is this row of holes here. So what I did was, once I had clipped my pages together like so, I then turned this over, and I did have my pencil marks to show me where to make the holes, but then just for additional safety, if you like, you can also use your hidden spine as a template so that you know where to put the holes. So just find where your hole goes in and then put it onto where the pencil mark is, and then press down. And then what I normally do is just carefully lift the papers up, flip it over, and just make sure that the hole is going to come out in the right place. 3 holes should be enough. If you feel like your pages might be a little bit insecure, then do 5 instead. So I would do an extra one in this space here. That's especially true if you've got some narrow papers that all 3 holes aren't going to catch the whole of the paper. So here, for example, this one's only going to be held in with 2 of the holes, just because of the way that it's positioned in the signature. But that should be fine, because once everything's in and folded, all of the pages should stay where they're supposed to. So what we need to do now is we need to sew these signatures onto the hidden spine in order to then be able to secure that into the cover of the journal. So I've got my bookmaker's needle here threaded with my waxed cotton, which has decided to have a little bit of a moment. And I'm going to start with the middle signature, which is this one. So we need to make sure that we've got the signature up the right way, and we've also got the hidden spine up the right way. And remember, this side with the pencil lines is the side that's going to be glued down. So you want this side to be facing your signature. And the way we're going to do this is we're just going to find the middle of the signature and then put the needle through that middle hole, and then find the middle hole on our hidden spine piece, just there, and then pull the string or the thread through, and then okay, and then to stop this from pulling all the way through, what I'm going to do is just tie this around the paper clip that I'm using to secure all the pages together. Don't have to do that, just like to do that so that it doesn't go all the way through. Then pull that roughly tight, and then you're going to go back down through the back of the hidden spine. I do have probably far more string here than I need, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. And then we're going to find the bottom hole, just here. and pull that through, like so. And then we're going to skip over the middle hole and go into the top hole. Again, mind your fingers when you're pushing needles through paper, because especially if it's a sharp needle, a number of times I've stabbed myself and then ended up with blood on my journal pages, which is not a good look. And then we're going to go in through that top hole, like this. And then the final one is to go back through the middle hole. When you're going back through a hole that's already got some thread through it, just be careful that you're not piercing the thread, because you can end up with it being split in half, which can then cause a few problems. Doesn't 100% matter if you accidentally do so, but if you can avoid doing so, then so much the better. Now we're going to go back up through that middle hole, like this, and then I'm going to just pass my needle under that center thread. Okay, I'm going to undo this knot now, because we don't need to secure that end anymore. And you can see this is really loose and flappy, so the first thing we need to do is just tighten this all up a little bit. So very carefully just pull your threads and adjust them until everything is nice and tight. Not too tight, because you don't want to rip your pages. So it's got a little bit of give, but it's not too bad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I've got one end either side of this center thread here, and I'm going to just tie a simple square knot, which is right over left, left over right, so a double knot, and then we can just snip that off. We'll worry about what to do with these ends later. And now we need to repeat that same process for the back and the front signatures. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and then I'll meet you back here when all signatures are sewn in. All three signatures are now sewn into our hidden spine. So just check that you're happy, everything's nice and secure, none of the pages are going to fall out. You obviously can see in between the signatures some of the hidden spine, which is why we made it something that looks vaguely attractive. So I'm just going to take off my last giant paper clip. I meant to say, if you don't have those giant paper clips, you could use something like this instead. I don't know if it's called a bulldog clip, but you can obviously clip that on like so, and then if you fold the arms down, then it just gives you a little bit more reach to hold those pages together while you're sewing them in. So sorry, I forgot to say that. Final stage now is to glue the signatures and the hidden spine into our cover. So here's our cover, and then we want to just offer that up like so, and just sort of make sure we know approximately where we're going to be gluing it in. And that looks great. And then we need to decide what glue we're going to use in order to stick this in. So this is paper, this is paper, so paper to paper we can probably get away with just some regular PVA, or you could use the Mod Podge, but I'm going to use my 3-in-1 glue because it doesn't matter if any leaches through on this occasion, and it's fairly quick drying, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm just going to spread some on here like so. This will also help to not only secure the signatures into the spine, but it'll also help secure the signatures to the hidden spine, because obviously we're putting glue across these strands. So the next thing you need to do is just line that up, and this is where using glue that doesn't dry instantly is quite helpful, because you can just double check that you're getting it in the right place. I mean, you could measure this if you wanted to, but I am just going to eyeball it. So it's going to be quite difficult because obviously we want to dry it that way really, but that's going to be a bit tricky to achieve. So let's just hold this in place, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm just going to sort of apply some pressure like this, and then I'm going to do the same in between the signatures as well, just to help push that down. If you don't have a bone folder, you could use a blunt knife or a ruler, anything that's going to allow you to sort of put a bit of pressure down onto that hidden spine while the glue is grabbing. Okay, so I think the best thing to do is probably just to close the book up and then just leave that to dry. You could put something heavy on the top here if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Just leave that to dry for a few hours. The glue's all dry now. This is held in nice and securely. I did end up putting a couple of paper clips just at the top and the bottom, on the front and the back, just to hold those top edges down because they were trying to peel away. So there we go. So this is now all securely fastened in. All the pages are in and happy. Quite pleased with how this has turned out. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with this journal, because I've got my other one that I already made, which is the one I'm intended on working in. So I'm not really sure what to do with this one. I could put it for sale in my Etsy shop. I think I will spend just one more video going through and just doing a few bits and bobs like these pages here where we haven't done anything with them yet, so things like this could become a pocket, and I'll just go through and perhaps do some stamping on some of the boring pages. So I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.